You ever heard the sound of dirt hitting wood from the inside? Most people don't. Most people don't ever want to. My name's Mason Ward. I'm a gravedigger here in Ashford, a small town in southern Ohio that smells of wet leaves and old brick after rain. Been doing this work for almost 15 years, which I guess is long enough to stop being spooked by shadows or creaks in the dark. Long enough that the dead are just part of the landscape, like trees or power lines, or so I thought. The cemetery sits on the far edge of town, past the cornfields and the rusted-out grain silo, with a busted wind vane that's been stuck pointing east for as long as I can remember. It's called Fairfield Rest, though locals call it the Rest, a polite way of pretending they don't think about what's under their feet when they drive past. I live in a 2-room shack just inside the cemetery gates. It's cheaper that way. And when you're the guy responsible for keeping graves tidy, repairing headstones, and making sure no vandals get in after dark, you want to be close by. It's not glamorous. My place smells faintly of gasoline and damp soil, no matter how much I clean. But I've never minded. It was last Tuesday night when things started. I'd been out later than usual, finishing up a burial for a man named Henry Collins. His family insisted on a same-day service, so by the time I tamped the last mound of dirt, the sky had gone navy, and the cicadas were screaming so loud it felt like the whole earth was buzzing. I just pulled the tarp over my wheelbarrow when I noticed something. A sound. Not wind. Not the creak of branches. It was a thump. Faint, but deliberate. I froze, listening. I knew the cemetery sounds. Foxes nosing through leaves, raccoons skittering along the fence. But this wasn't animal noise. It came again. Thump. I stepped back toward Henry's grave, thinking maybe the dirt was settling faster than expected. Sometimes that happens if the soil's loose, but it didn't sound like shifting earth. It was sharper, hollow, and then 3 knocks, slow, even, like someone on the other side of a door. I laughed under my breath. Couldn't help it. It was so absurd. The dead don't knock. Maybe it was an echo, a branch tapping against the coffin lid in my head, my mind trying to make patterns where there weren't any. I told myself that as I gathered my tools, but as I turned toward my shack, I felt something strange. The kind of gut-deep awareness you get when someone's standing behind you in the dark. I didn't hear footsteps. Didn't hear anything at all. The cicadas had gone silent. I walked faster. By the time I shut my door, locked it, and poured myself a whiskey, I'd convinced myself I was tired, I sat in my one good chair, listening to the rain start tapping against the tin roof. Comforting, steady. Then I heard it again. Not from outside this time. From beneath the floorboards. 3 knocks. Slow. Even. The thing is, my shack doesn't have a basement. I didn't move for a full minute. Just sat there in my chair, glass halfway to my mouth, listening. The rain was pattering soft now, more of a whisper than a tap, so I could hear every little creak of the shack. But the knocks didn't come again. I set my glass down and crouched low, pressing my ear to the warped wooden floorboards. All I heard was the faint hum of the fridge and the soft hiss of the kerosene heater. Still, my chest felt tight, like something was waiting for me to make a mistake. I told myself I was being stupid. Probably the sound had carried from outside. Maybe a raccoon had gotten under the shack and was rooting around in the crawl space. That's all it was. That's what I kept repeating as I grabbed my flashlight and went out into the rain. The crawl space hatch is on the back of the shack, low to the ground. I got down on my knees in the mud, clicked on the light, and shone it inside. Just wet dirt. No movement, no sound, but the smell. I've dug enough graves to know the smell of freshly turned earth. The metallic tang of iron-rich soil. This was different. Stale, damp, and faintly sweet. Like flowers left too long in stagnant water. I crawled back out, wiped the mud from my knees, and told myself to forget it. But that smell stuck to me. I swear I could taste it in the back of my throat. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Habit, mostly. The rain had stopped, leaving the whole cemetery wrapped in fog so thick I could barely see the nearest row of stones. The air was heavy and wet, clinging to my skin like breath. I made coffee and stepped outside to do my morning walk. I check for broken branches, see if the rain washed any dirt away from the new graves. That morning, I found something that made me stop cold. Henry Collins' grave, the one I'd finished late last night, looked wrong. The dirt was uneven, as if someone had clawed at it in the night. The surface was peppered with small indentations, not footprints exactly, but deeper, sharper, almost like the heel of a hand. And near the headstone, something lay half buried in the mud. I was pushing up against the underside of my ribs. I kept glancing toward the tree line, half expecting to see someone standing there, just watching. That night, the knocks came again. 3 of them, slow, even. But this time, they were farther away, not under my shack, out in the graveyard. I didn't want to go out there. Hell, I'm not proud to say I stood frozen in my doorway for a good 10 minutes, flashlight in hand, raincoat half on. End. Slash was pushing up against the underside of my ribs, I kept glancing toward the tree line, half expecting to see someone standing there, just watching. That night, the knocks came again. 3 of them, slow, even, but this time they were farther away, not under my shack, out in the graveyard. I didn't want to go out there. Hell, I'm not proud to say I stood frozen in my doorway for a good 10 minutes, flashlight in hand, raincoat half on. But when you're the caretaker, you don't get to ignore strange noises in the middle of the night. The fog was thicker than before, swallowing the light from my torch. I could see maybe 10 feet ahead, no more. My boots squelched in the wet grass as I moved, trying to follow the sound. The knocks came every 30 seconds or so, just enough to keep me moving forward. And then, just as I stepped between 2 crooked headstones, the sound stopped. I swept the light around. That's when I saw the grave. Henry Collins' plot. The mound of dirt had sunk almost 6 inches since yesterday morning, and in the center, the soil pulsed like something breathing underneath. I filled in enough graves to know what soil looks like when it settles. It dips slowly, unevenly, over weeks. It does not move like that. It does not rise and fall, steady as a heartbeat. My first thought was sinkhole. Maybe the coffin collapsed. But the pulse was too regular, too deliberate. I stood there, my breath misting in the cold air, the flashlight trembling in my grip. Then the mound stopped moving. The quiet was so complete. I could hear the condensation dripping from the tree branches. My own heartbeat was pounding in my ears. I took a step closer. The dirt looked perfectly still again, like nothing had happened. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it until the light caught something near the foot of the grave. A handprint, not in the mud on top, but pressed up from underneath. The fingers were splayed, the shape stretched and distorted by the soil pressing down over it. I staggered back, nearly tripping over a stone. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't leave it. Couldn't leave him, or whatever was in there, like that. My mind raced. If Henry wasn't dead when we buried him, no, the coroner, the undertaker, they'd know. They had to know. I stayed out there longer than I should have, waiting, watching, flashlight beam fixed on that mound. Nothing else moved. Eventually, the fog got so thick, the light just bounced back into my eyes. I gave up and went back inside, locking the door behind me. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that handprint. I dreamed of soil pouring into my mouth, lungs filling, fingernails snapping as I clawed upward. I awoke in a sweat just before dawn. When I went out for my morning rounds, Henry's grave was was different again. The mound was completely flat now. No handprint, no uneven dirt, just the smooth, damp surface, like nothing had happened. But lying on top, at an angle, like it had been set there on purpose, was a brass button. I recognized it immediately. It matched the buttons on the suit Henry had been buried in. I picked it up. It was warm. The whole day, I kept that button in my pocket, my thumb running over it. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? The sheriff would laugh. The undertaker would get defensive. And the Collins family would probably sue. That night, I decided to keep the lanterns burning in the yard. I have 2 old kerosene lamps I sometimes set up for light when working late. I place them on either side of my shack, facing the cemetery. The glow barely cut through the mist, but it made me feel less like I was staring into a void. Around midnight, the knocks came again, but now they weren't alone. Something was moving between the graves. I saw it in the corner of my vision. A shift in the fog, the faintest silhouette. Pah! Tall, thin. It moved with a strange gait, like it was dragging one foot. I called out, "Hey, you can't be in here." But the figure didn't stop. Didn't even turn its head. It just kept weaving between headstones, slow and deliberate. I stepped off my porch, the wet grass cold through my boots. My flashlight cut a narrow path ahead of me, and I aimed it where I'd seen the figure. The beam caught a shadow, just for a moment, before it vanished. Behind an angel statue, I hurried forward, rounding the statue, and there was nothing there. No footprints, no sound, but Henry's grave was open. The coffin lid was visible, tilted up just an inch. The beam from my flashlight slid across the wet, dark wood of the coffin lid. I could see the line of nails bent upward, splintered along the edge where it had been forced. It wasn't vandalism. No one could have pried it like that without tools, and there were no marks from a crowbar or shovel. This looked pushed from the inside. The air coming from the gap was wrong. Not just the snow, though that was enough to turn my stomach. A mix of sour decay and something coppery sweet. It was warm. The kind of warm you only get when something alive has been breathing in a sealed space. I told myself to back away, call someone, do anything except what I was about to do. Dot, 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 dot. But my boots carried me forward until I was standing over the coffin, my hand hovering over the lid. That's when it moved. The whole coffin jerked upward, the lid banging against the dirt with a hollow thunk. My flashlight slipped in my sweaty grip, the beam swinging wildly. The coffin settled again, but then something scraped against the underside of the lid. Long, dragging strokes, like nails raking wood. Mason. I heard my name, low, muffled, from inside. I stumbled back, heart slamming so hard, my vision blurred. Whoever, whatever, was in there knew me. I spun, scanning the fog for, I don't know, someone else, something watching. My lanterns flickered hard, their flames stretching tall before guttering low. Then came the pounding, not knocks this time, full, frantic blows from inside the coffin. Dirt shifted and slid, little streams of it running down the mound as the lid bounced under the force. I wanted to run. God, I wanted to bolt back to the shack, lock the door, and drown myself in whiskey until morning. But my feet wouldn't move. My mind was a mess of half-formed thoughts. If he's alive, I can't just leave him. If it's not him, I don't want to see it. I leaned forward, my breath clouding in the cold air. Then 2 fingers slid up through the gap in the coffin lid. Pale, caked in dirt, flexing. I couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink. The fingers curled, digging into the edge of the coffin as if to pull the lid further open. And then the hand snapped upward, impossibly fast, clamping around my wrist. It was warm, too warm. The grip was strong, almost crushing. My flashlight tumbled from my other hand and rolled into the grass, the beam swinging crazily. I yanked back, but the thing in the coffin pulled harder, dragging me toward that narrow gap. Mason. The voice was clearer now, too clear. It was Henry's voice, but wrong, stretched, like someone playing a tape too slowly. I braced my foot against the mound, pulling with everything I had. The fingers tightened, nails biting into my skin, and then, just as sudden as it had grabbed me, it let go. I fell backward into the mud, sucking in air. My flashlight beam caught the hand as it withdrew, only it wasn't just a hand anymore. Something else pushed up through the gap, something wet and glistening that caught the light like raw meat. That was enough. I ran. I didn't stop until I was inside my shack, with the door bolted and both lanterns burning bright. The knocks came back around 3 a.m. This time they were on my door. The first knock rattled the door in its frame. Not loud, steady, like before, but each one vibrated in my ribs. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. The lanterns flickered again. I gripped the shotgun I kept above the door, my hands slick with sweat. I'd only ever used it for snakes and the occasional raccoon that got too bold. Never for anything that could knock like a man. Mason. The voice was closer now, right outside. It was Henry's tone again, but it didn't sound muffled by wood or dirt. It was almost in my ear. I forced myself to speak, though my throat was tight. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, scraping. Something dragging slowly along the wall of the shack, moving toward the window. I snapped the lantern off to kill the glare, trying to see outside. Fog pressed against the glass like frost, the condensation dripping in thin rivulets. I saw a shadow pass in front of it, tall, wrong in proportion. One arm seemed longer than the other, its hand hanging low enough to almost scrape the ground. I backed away from the window, the boards creaking under me. The shadow froze, slowly, so slow I almost thought I imagined it. The head turned toward the glass. And then it smiled. Not Henry's face, not even close. Just a wide, stretched mouth, teeth too many and too thin, pressed against the pane. I fired. The blast shattered the glass, the recoil slamming into my shoulder. For a second, the fog swirled away in the shockwave, and there was nothing there. Just mist, just the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner with my shotgun, reloading it, watching the door until the first pale smear of dawn bled into the fog. When the light finally came, I stepped outside to check the damage. That's when I saw them, tracks in the wet grass. Not footprints, not exactly. Long, narrow impressions, almost like a handprint, but with only 3 thick, jointed fingers. They started at Henry's grave and ended at my front door. The next night, I didn't even wait for the knocks. I locked every window, nailed the shutters, and lit every lantern I had. I stayed up, staring at the door, counting every creak and groan the shack made. It didn't come. Not at night, anyway. It came the next morning. I was halfway across the cemetery with a rake over my shoulder when I heard it, faint knocking. Not from my shack this time. From the caretaker's shed near the west fence. A place I hadn't unlocked in months. I set down the rake and walked toward it. Each knock coming slower, heavier, like sinking into the wood. My stomach knotted as I reached the shed. Padlock hung open. I nudged the door with my boot. Inside, it was dim, the air stale. My tools were lined up exactly where I'd left them. But at the far wall, one of the shelves had been dragged aside. Behind it was a square of bare dirt, and from that dirt, something had been digging up. The dirt inside the shed wasn't loose the way it gets after a fresh dig. It was churned, damp clumps scattered in a ring, as if something had been forcing its way up in frantic bursts. In the center, the hole was maybe 2 feet deep, narrowing as it went down. Sides clawed into rough grooves. Not shovel marks. Not human fingernails. I crouched close, the smell hitting me first. That same sweet, stagnant rot from under my shack. It curled up into my sinuses, clinging like mildew. The air rising from the hole was warmer than the shed. My breath caught in my throat. That's when I saw the scrap of cloth. Half buried in the churned soil was a strip of black fabric, frayed at the edges, mottled with dark stains. I knew it before I even touched it. It matched Henry's burial suit. But Henry's coffin was still in the grave, wasn't it? I backed out of the shed, heart hammering. My mind was running in loops. Maybe animals had dug the fabric up from the grave. Maybe vandals had gotten to the coffin first. Maybe I was losing my goddamn mind. Still, I couldn't shake the image of those prints in the grass, leading from Henry's grave to my door. I decided to test something. That night, I took the lanterns out again, but this time, I placed one right on top of Henry's grave. Just a little experiment. I told myself, if something came back, I'd see the signs in the morning. I didn't have to wait that long. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the smell, stronger than ever, the kind that makes your eyes water. I rolled out of bed and looked toward the cemetery. The lantern on Henry's grave was still lit, but it wasn't where I left it. It had been moved. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The lantern now sat 3 graves over, balanced on the headstone of a woman named Abigail Pierce, dead since 1894. The soil at her grave was freshly turned. I didn't move any closer. I just stood there in the damp grass, my skin crawling. That's when the whisper came. Not from Henry's grave, not from Abigail's, from behind me. Mason. I spun, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the mist, and landed on a figure standing less than 10 feet away. It wore Henry's suit, or what was left of it, the fabric shredded, hanging in strips. The chest sagged inward, ribs jutting at sharp angles under the skin. The head tilted too far to one side, neck swollen and purpled. But it was the eyes that froze me in place. They were open, alive. Mason, it said again. But the lips didn't move right, like it was learning how to speak. I raised the flashlight higher, and that's when I saw its hands, long, pale, with nails dark from soil. The same hands that had grabbed me at the grave. It stepped forward. The grass didn't crunch under its feet. No sound at all. "What do you want?" My voice cracked. It tilted its head the other way, almost curious. Then it opened its mouth, far too wide. From inside came the wet sound of soil shifting, and beneath that, a second voice, faint, ragged. "Help me." That second voice froze my blood. It wasn't Henry's warped tone. It wasn't the stretched, unnatural drawl I'd been hearing for nights. It sounded human, weak, strained, like someone calling from 6 feet under. stumbled backward, my boots sinking into the wet grass. "Henry?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer wasn't that simple. The thing in front of me took another step forward, and I realized the sound, "Help me," wasn't coming from its mouth at all. It was coming from inside its chest. A faint echo, muffled by flesh and bone. It stopped just far enough away for me to see the way its skin moved. Not breathing, shifting, as though something else was moving underneath. I thought about the scrap of coffin wood I'd found, the brass button, a digging hole in the shed. Dot, if Henry's body was here, what the hell was buried in that coffin now? It raised its right hand. The long fingers curled in a slow, beckoning motion. "Mason." I tightened my grip on the flashlight. "What do you want from me?" The thing's head jerked at an unnatural angle, quick, like a reflex. Then it pointed, not at me, at the far corner of the cemetery, where the fog pressed against the old iron fence. I followed its gesture with my light. There, half hidden in the mist, was another mound of dirt. Not one of my graves. This was fresh, unmarked, the soil clumped and wet like it had been shoveled only hours ago. And in the center of that mound was movement. A hand. Pale, small, clawing upward. The voice from the thing's chest was louder now, urgent. "Help me." I looked back at its face, at those wrong, unblinking eyes. It took another step forward. The realization hit me like cold water. It wasn't Henry speaking. Henry was inside it, still alive. I bolted for the unmarked mound, my legs cutting through the fog, my breath tearing in my chest. Dropping to my knees, I dug with my bare hands, tossing clumps of dirt aside. The soil was warm, sickly warm. Behind me, I could hear the thing's footsteps now. Slow, steady, getting closer. I hit something soft, flesh. My fingers found a wrist and pulled hard. A woman's arm came free, skin clanny and slick. I dug faster, uncovering her face, young, maybe mid-20s, gasping for air as soon as her mouth was clear. She clung to me, coughing up mud. It puts you in. Her voice cracked, eyes going wide. "Don't let it." The rest of her sentence drowned under a new sound, the thing's breathing, right behind me. The air turned heavy, thick with that rot-sweet stench. I felt a shadow fall over us, and then a hand. Those same long, pale fingers clamped down on my shoulder. The grip was crushing, heat searing through the fabric of my jacket. I twisted hard, trying to pull free, but the thing only tightened its hold. My flashlight fell, beams spinning across the fog until it landed on the woman's terrified face. Mason. The thing's voice was close enough that I could feel it vibrating in my bones. But beneath that warped tone came the muffled, desperate "help me" from inside its chest. Henry's voice, trapped, strangled. I swung my elbow back, catching it in the ribs. The sound that came out of it wasn't human, wet, guttural, and bubbling, like something boiling in tar. The grip loosened just enough for me to tear away. "Run!" I yelled to the woman. She scrambled to her feet, still coughing up mud, and bolted into the fog. I didn't watch where she went. All my focus was on the thing. It straightened, its limbs bending just slightly wrong, and began to advance. Every step was slow, deliberate, as if savoring the chase. Its mouth hung open now, that impossible stretch revealing the dark, wet cavity inside. I backed toward the caretaker's shed. My shotgun was inside. My heart was pounding so hard, I could barely hear my own thoughts. But one kept cutting through. If I don't end this, it will keep digging them up. It will keep putting them inside itself. I made it to the shed, wrenched the door open, and grabbed the shotgun from the wall. By the time I turned, it was in the doorway. Up close, I could see that its skin wasn't solid. It shifted, rippled, as if the shape I saw was only dot. A thin layer stretched over something else moving underneath. Faces pressed against the inside of its flesh for a moment, then gone. Henry's voice came again, faint and shaking. "Please." I raised the shotgun. "Let him go." The thing tilted its head, almost curious. Then it took another step forward. I fired. The blast tore through its chest, black fluid spraying across the dirt. It staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, it lurched toward me, faster now, the wet sounds inside its body intensifying. I pumped the gun and fired again, aiming higher, this time hitting the neck. The head lolled, hanging by threads of sinew. The thing made a sound that was half a scream, half the groan of shifting earth. And then it collapsed, crumpling into itself, skin deflating like an empty sack. The air was thick with the stench of rot. Something moved in the remains, a pale arm, then a head. Henry. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, but alive. I dragged him out, coughing and gasping, the black fluid coating his suit. He tried to speak, but only one word came out: "More." I looked back at the collapsed skin. It wasn't just skin anymore. The hole in its chest led down into the earth. A tunnel, breathing warm air up into the night. And from deep below, faint but unmistakable, 3 slow knocks. I hauled Henry to his feet and started toward the shack. We didn't speak. The woman was gone. No sign of where she'd run. I got him inside, locked the door, and sat there with the shotgun in my lap until dawn broke. In the morning, the collapsed skin was gone, just churned dirt where it had fallen. Henry wouldn't talk about what happened. He just kept repeating the same thing over and over. It wasn't the only one. Now, I keep the lanterns burning all night, I don't sleep much. Some nights I hear knocking, far away, somewhere deep under the cemetery. Some nights it's closer, and if you ever hear your name whispered from the dark, don't turn around, just run.